What's up, everybody? Welcome to November 22nd, another episode of Stand Tall in the Art of War. Let's dive right in. We're in chapter 3, verse 12. There are three ways in which a ruler can bring misfortune upon his army. 13. By commanding the army to advance or not retreat, being ignorant of the fact that it cannot obey. This is called hobbling the army. 14. By attempting to govern an army in the same way as he administers a kingdom. Being ignorant of the conditions which obtain in an army. This causes restlessness in the soldier's mind. 15. By employing the officers of his army without discrimination through ignorance of the military principle of adaptation of circumstances. This shakes the confidence of his soldiers. I like that one the most because of the adaptation principle of the military, of circumstances. Adaptation to circumstances, not the military, excuse me. So, that just says to us anything and everything, any circumstance requires us to adapt, and any leader is able to adapt in the moment. They're able to pivot, they're able to make those calls. Well, that's how it's always done, is not the answer. All right, Master Sun says, so there are three ways in which a civil leadership causes the military trouble. This is an alternate translation to get some perspective. When a civil leadership, unaware of the facts, tells its armies to advance when it should not, or tells its armies to retreat when it should not, this is called tying up the armies. When the civil leadership is ignorant of military affairs, but shares equally in the government of the armies, the soldiers get confused. When the civil leadership is ignorant of military maneuvers, but shares equally in the command of the armies, the soldiers hesitate. Once the armies are confused and hesitant, trouble comes from competitors. This is called taking away victory by deranging the military. So, lots of reflections here from a couple of different of the other generals. Wang Ji says, to get rid of these problems, it is necessary to delegate unbridled authority. So it is imperative that officers who are to be generals be both loyal and talented. So delegation, we know a lot about delegation in the sense of we know that we need to do it as leaders. We know that if we free up time for things that we're not good at, Tom Rath, Strengths Finder sort of way. All the studies say, to let go of what we grew up being told of, like being aware of our weaknesses and working on our weaknesses. And in fact, what we should do is focus on our strengths and making those even better. And so by delegating, we're using our weak points and allowing someone else, by being humble and being aware of our weaknesses in ourselves, and letting someone else who is strong where we are weak do the task for us, and that is our army. Dumu says that if the military were to be governed in the same way as ordinary civilian society, then the soldiers would be confused because there are already customs of military procedure and command in effect. Mei Yao Chen says that military and civil affairs are different, dealing with different matters. If you try to use methods of civilian government to govern a military operation, the operation will be confused. It's just different. I've never been in the military. I've tried to join 3 separate occasions, once to the Army and then twice to the Air Force. And if you try to look, we civilians in the U.S. have it easy because we rest on the shoulders of giants because of the sacrifices that a lot of men have made before us, and that's something that we just need to know. And because of our lifestyle, and it might have been different back in the day, but the truth of the matter is when you go into the military, you need to be a different mentality, a different person altogether. Jang Yu says that a nation can be governed by humanity and justice, but not an army. An army can be guided by maneuvering, but not a nation. When there are among civilian officials attached to military commands those who do not know about military strategy, if they are allowed to share in the responsibilities of the military leadership, then the chain of command will not be unified and the soldiers will become hesitant. So I like here where he says an army can be guided by maneuvering, but not a nation. A nation can be governed by humanity and justice, but not an army. So an army should not rule a nation. And I think that we see this in the political spectrum extremes, whether it's fascism or communism. We see a lot of military rule, and right here it says that that's just because that's just not a good thing because of the different mindset and the different mentality that we know. Dumu says that also, if a general lacks the planning ability to assess the officers and place them in positions where they can use the best of their abilities, instead of assigning them automatically and thus not making full use of their talents, then the army will become hesitant. So, as a good leader, as a good general, your planning and strategy ability in order to put your people in the right spot is essential. Huang Shigong said, "Those who are good at delegating responsibility employ the intelligent, the brave, the greedy, and the foolish. The intelligent are glad to establish their merit. The brave like to act out their ambitions. The greedy welcome an opportunity to pursue profit, and the foolish do not care if they die." That's harsh. That's harsh, but like a good leadership, if you're interviewing somebody for a position, and depending on what position it is that you're trying to fill in your company, then you need people who are brave. You need people who are greedy. You need people who, are ambitious, intelligent, and then foolish. I think we should try to maybe find another word for foolish, but I think that I don't know. I think if you soften it and say, do not care if they die, I think if you soften it to foolish, if you soften it to the people who just want to live life, it's not that they're necessarily smart or low IQ. It's just that they're content with the way things are, and they don't care if they die. And that can be a metaphor of like, well, they don't care if they're, if they put in their 6 to 8 hours a day and they go home and spend time with their family and then spend time at night playing video games and they sleep in the morning, and they just, you kind of like do the bare minimum. You need people like that in your company too. Let's be frank. That does not necessarily mean that they are foolish. A lot of people are very intelligent in their own way. But I think if we try to use this as a metaphor, the foolish people can be the ones who are just content. If your own army is hesitant and confused, you bring trouble on yourself as if you were to bring enemies in to overcome you. And then Mengshi wraps up this reflection with, when the army troops are in doubt about their responsibilities and confused about what to do, then competitors will take advantage of this disorganization condition and cause trouble. So we're hopping over to the Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman, November 22nd. The glass is already broken. Fortune falls heavily on those for whom she's unexpected. The one always on the lookout easily endures. Seneca on Consolation to Helvia 5.3. That's profound. I mean, fortune falls heavily on those for whom she's unexpected. If you're not ready, and that's what we're doing by reading The Art of War, is because we are always on the lookout for these misfortunes. We know, we're prepared, we're adaptable. Amor fati, right? That's acceptance. That's the theme for November. There is a story of a Zen master who had a beautiful prized cup. The master would repeat to himself, "The glass is already broken." He enjoyed the cup, he used it, he showed it off to visitors, but in his mind it was already broken. And so one day, when it actually did break, he simply said, "Of course." This is how the Stoics think too. There is supposedly a true story about Epictetus and a lamp. He never locked his house, and so his expensive lamp was stolen. When Epictetus replaced it, he replaced it with a cheaper one so he could be less attached to it if it were stolen again. Devastation. It's that feeling when we're absolutely crushed and shocked by an event. Is a factor of how unlikely we consider that event in the first place. No one is wrecked by the fact that it's snowing in the winter. About the occurrences Oh, excuse me, I skipped a line. No one is wrecked by the fact that it's snowing in the winter because we've accepted and even anticipated this turn of events. What about the occurrences that surprise us? We might not be too shocked if we took the time to consider their possibility. So this is just like, this is fantastic because like just yesterday at work, one of my foremen was changing out a grounding lug on a meter, and there's this little teeny tiny screw that he was undoing, and it fell out and it literally bounced and it fell into the pipe. Now, of course, I didn't see it, I didn't witness it, I just heard this is what he said and how he lost it. And to be honest, it's so ridiculous that I do believe it. I mean, absolutely. There's no other way that it would have turned out. Like that is like, I think from the TV show My Name Is Earl, where his brother is like, "Hey Earl, I was throwing Cheetos up in the air the other night, and one of them missed. It landed on my chin, rolled down my sleeve, and back into the bag." And it sounds so impossible. And of course, his brother does end up admitting that it didn't happen. But fantastical things like this that take so much of different variables and inputs to line up in order for it to happen. Now, of course, this is like a lot easier to happen based on where the pipe in the meter was and everything. But I think that's the thing, is like, I just laughed it off and I said, that's fine. We can go to the store and get another one. I totally believe you. Like, don't, like, I could have blown up and got mad and been a tyrant, or I could have acted the way that I acted, which is like, dude, that's so funny. I that's such a ridiculous thing. I totally believe it happened, because it probably did. And however you anticipate things to go wrong is the outcome. And so, and just like almost at least two other times in recent weeks, last week specifically, there's been something where I thought I had a certain material in my car. It ended up being in my foreman's car, and it all turned out in the end. It all actually ended up being for the best. And so I think that's what we need to look at when we're thinking of this reflection on Seneca is, according to Sun Tzu, we have to be adaptable and we have to be ready. And just like Seneca says, we need to anticipate even the craziest things. And then from what we've learned from all of our reflections is that it's the way that we react that matters.